Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Pierre, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Devs Season 1, Episode 6. I don't know why I said Season 1, it's a miniseries, but regardless. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. This episode, we have our main characters, Lily and Jamie, kind of finally getting into the fold and figuring out what's going on because they visit Forrest and Katie at Forrest's home. The fact that Katie's spending the night there is actually kind of a reveal in of itself because they're in a relationship of sorts. Which
didn't really have that peg, did we?
No, well, it feels kind of weird, honestly, because like when he gets out of bed and you see someone's lying there, because we know it's not like a flashback or anything, so I'm like, wait, well, the only person that even could be is Katie, but it's never really felt kind of like that, and the entire thing has this kind of awkward feeling to it, which kind of makes sense in the context of like how this formed. It's like, okay, he was lonely and upset, and she's kind of like filling that void. Although I laughed again. Do you know last episode or 2 episodes ago, whatever episode it was, with all the duplicates? I was laughing because there was a scene like that on Picard.
Episode,
yeah. Well, on Picard, she also had a relationship with an older man. So I feel like there's a weird bunch of parallels going on between the two shows with her, with Alison Pill. But regards to that, so this episode is one of those things that a lot of shows do, where you'll have the big episode somewhere, usually near the end, sort of maybe start of Act 3, end of Act 2, where you'll have just the conversation episode, where you'll have finally everything comes to a head. And not necessarily even just miniseries, like lots of seasons of TV have done this, where you'll have the big thing where characters finally sit down and they'll do like almost a special gimmick episode where no, the entire thing's just a conversation between two main characters. And it's not quite that. There's a little bit of lead up, there's a little bit after, but the bulk of the episode is essentially Katie and Lily sitting at the dining table in Forrest's home, and Katie sort of opening up and sort of telling her everything she wants to know. I usually love these episodes. Unfortunately, I think this one falls flat, and it falls flat for two reasons. One, 90% of the information that's brought out in this conversation we already know. It's just Lily finding out for the first time. And number two, we've complained that the actress who plays Lily, has been kind of the weakest element of the show. I think it really hurt this episode more than any of them so far. There were several beats in this episode where her kind of, I don't know, almost tone deaf performance just kind of completely just no-sold everything.
I think part of this is not even just her fault. I think this is the writing of her
That's
character.
fair.
We've long said she's kind of been the blandest character. And the way this episode just starts, it's like, oh yeah, we got you out of the hospital. Like, wait, what? What's going on? We'll just tell her the information. She's essential to all this, and I just don't care about Lily still. And we're 3/4 through now, and I just don't care about her. And I feel like if I cared about her as a character, a lot of this, the information that we already know, seeing her reaction and how she interprets it, might have meant something. But as it was, I was just like, yeah, okay. The 10% or so that we didn't know was really interesting stuff, don't get me wrong.
No, yeah, the one big thing we find out is really interesting, and I've said in the past that this show kind of feels like a movie plot stretched over 8 episodes, and how, well, I can see that being kind of slow for some people. I've not felt it too much because I've liked kind of the basket and the details and the atmosphere that the show has done. This is the one episode so far where I really felt like, yeah, I think I'd prefer this to be a movie. If just based on this episode alone, I felt like a lot of this just.
Do you know what I think it is? As a movie, the fact that Lily's character we don't care about wouldn't matter anywhere near as much.
No, it
because
wouldn't.
we'd be spending so little time with her that, okay, we care about. Well, okay, care about's maybe the wrong word, but we're interested in Forrest and by extension, Katie. Whereas Lily's just the viewfinder at that point for us.
Yeah, she's kind of the conduit for the audience. I think the problem here is that we've been ahead of her almost the entire way because we're seeing stuff that's going on with Forrest and Katie, and we're seeing other parts of the puzzle. The thing for me with this episode, though, is that I kind of realised just how little, like, because it kind of feels like it's meant to be this big culmination, right? Where it's, because usually when this happens in a TV show and you have this episode where you finally have the conversation, or even the comic book example I can think of, actually, bizarrely, because I've read this issue, is in J. Michael Straczynski's run of Spider-Man, there's an issue called it's actually literally the title of it, it's called The Conversation, and what that is basically Aunt May, like, has found out that he's Spider-Man, and it's just them talking. The entire issue is Peter Parker and Aunt May having a conversation about how he became Spider-Man, how he was there for Uncle Ben dying, how they've both felt about that in secret, and and it's basically just exploring everything that's meant everything to this character, or both these characters, for at that point, like 40 years of history, right? And it's this big deal. And usually in TV shows, like, well, maybe obviously 40 years, but you have this feeling of like, okay, it's this big culmination of like, everything we've been building to. Somehow Vince Gilligan almost does this in every scene that he writes, where everything.
Yeah, but I mean, if you want to narrow it down to a specific episode, it's The Fly, right?
Sure, yeah, The Fly's a good one in Breaking Bad to bring up. It's an episode where two characters, either by choice or because they're trapped in a situation together, will finally open up about certain things. It's just that kind of story. This conversation, as it was all happening, and like Lily's finally getting her answers, it kind of dawned on me just how little the actual journey of her, like what has she actually been doing the last like 3 or 4 episodes ultimately, and trying to find the answers. It's not really amounted to much.
No, and I think the problem is there are interesting things that we've kind of cut away from. Like there was the idea that she pretended to be, mentally ill to get into it, and then that backfired, and they threw her into an institution. That's an interesting idea, but then we just break her out off screen. Like that loses a lot of the interesting stuff there. Surely,
It wasn't completely off screen.
I mean, mostly.
But I didn't really need to see more of the breaking out. Jamie showing up, and that was enough for me.
Okay, for me, it's not the breaking out is kind of the problem. More to the point, though, it's just we'll just get her out of there. It's fine. The idea of her having to then kind of prove that she was mentally stable, it would have been far more interesting.
I agree with the problem is that it almost feels like it doesn't matter after the fact, but the actual moment, all I needed of the breaking out is the sort of like the fist pumping moment of Jamie showing up to save her. Like that is all you need. That is the entire thing you need for the actual breakout itself. The fact that after that is almost irrelevant, to the point where she's even willing to just go home and sleep in her own bed because, well, Forrest doesn't seem to care that I'm out, and he's not going to turn me in, so who cares? It feels all a bit kind of inconsequential ultimately. And this is where I feel like if this was a 2-hour movie, like a lot of that time wouldn't have been spent doing any of that. It would have been a bit more kind of succinct. And I've not had a problem up until this point, but this episode I really felt it. And I really felt like, given we've got 2 episodes left, given kind of what they've set up for kind of the end game of the story, there's really nothing about this that couldn't have been in a 2-hour movie.
No, probably not.
And I maybe I love the last 2 episodes. Maybe this one will be the outlier, but I think the reason why this one hurts so much is because it's not just that it's kind of a dull episode on its own. It's that it kind of is bringing to light or all the problems that we kind of knew were there, but it didn't really matter as much. They're all kind of more of an issue all of a sudden with this episode.
Yeah, I'd say like the character beats and the meandering plot. For the first 2/3 of the show, it was fine. We're getting on with it. There's mood and there's teases, and we're like, okay, we'll get to some cool stuff. And okay, we're getting to the cool stuff. Don't get me wrong, but we're not got the characters to care about to kind of back that up.
Yeah, Lily's really hard to give a shit about.
Do you know what really highlighted the problem here as well? Is so while she's having her conversation with Katie, outside we've got Forrest and Jamie.
Well, I was going to bring this up, right? Because I've seen people on the internet complain, essentially what we were complaining about the main part of like the dinner table scene, right, with Katie and Lily. And then they also threw on as an addition, and the other half was just 2 idiots playing Frisbee. So they also didn't like the other part. And I thought that was kind of notable because I actually kind of liked the Forrest and Jamie scenes for the most part.
I thought that stuff was far more interesting. Like when Jamie says, Ken's like, Forrest is like, hey, what happened to your hand? And he's like, really? You're going to pretend you don't know? Your attack dog Kenton did this. And he actually looks kind of horrified. He's like, oh, shit, I really didn't realize what he did. He said he roughed him up a bit, and I didn't think he'd tortured you.
I felt like I got more out of both of their characters through they basically forcing themselves to have small talk than I did out of Lily and Katie, despite the fact that they're having all these big conversations about all these big things.
It was interesting seeing Forrest acting like a father, essentially.
Yeah.
By the end of it, being like, "Hey, come on, let's just go play Frisbee, whatever."
But the point that kind of like brings this all across to me though is that they're having this big conversation at the table, and it cuts to what is with the exception of a little bit towards the end about how it's is frisbee a sport or not, it's just continuous shots of them throwing a frisbee back and forth to each other, and I found that genuinely more fascinating than the previous scene of the conversation where they're actually getting to a lot of the big sci-fi ideas.
Yeah, I think part of it is the dichotomy of just it's so simple. They're just there playing frisbee while this big metaphysical conversation is going on inside.
That's not even why I think it's interesting to me. It's interesting because these two characters have never met. They kind of acknowledge that. Like, Jamie obviously knows who Forrest is because he's kind of a famous dude and like whatever. But Forrest genuinely wanting to know who Jamie is and asking him questions is a genuine connection that we've not seen. And the funny thing is that's also technically true for Lily and Katie, but somehow Lily is just not interested enough to make me care that she's meeting someone for the first time. And I don't know, our delivery is so monotone of everything.
It is, and I think the key thing is as well is we know it's not Alison Pill that's the problem here. Because
no, she's perfectly solid. Is what she's doing, and then this extended beyond this scene where they go back to her place and he's setting up the couch, and you knew where this scene was going. It was so obvious where it was going, and she comes out and she's like, "Stay in my bed." He's like, "No, it's okay. I can sleep on the couch." And he's being chivalrous essentially, and she's like, "No. I want you to stay in my bed." And then she says, "I didn't know him," and I thought, if I was Jamie here, right, in this situation, right, like, okay, maybe he's just like, it's been a while. The offer of sex is on the table. Maybe he's just saying, screw it, I'll go for it anyway, whatever. But if I was Jamie, I think I would have a problem here with her entire point being, yeah, the guy I was doing all this for, that I was in love with, he wasn't really who I thought he was. Like, her entire speech is precedent or predicated on the idea of it being about Sergei and not about how she's realized that she actually wants him. Like, it's all about how that relationship wasn't really worth anything, so I guess you'll do.
It is, and do you know what would have not say make this work, but made it better is if she'd left him for Sergei. I could kind of see the appeal of going, "Oh, I made a mistake," but they'd broken up already before she met Sergei, so she'd already decided this was a bad relationship. Both of them had, for that matter, to varying degrees. Obviously, he was still far more into her, but he understood the nature of the relationship at that stage. And then she ran into Sergei and started that relationship. So, but if she'd been with Jamie as she'd met Sergei and kind of gone, oh, actually, I prefer this guy, that would have kind of made more sense here, I think.
Yeah, well, the sad part is I kind of get what the show wants to do with this, is that she's taking comfort in who she knows. That's the exact line. She says, "I didn't know him, I know you." And the entire thing, everything we're doing with devs is the idea that Forrest doesn't want any factors that he doesn't expect or understand. He wants to follow the tram lines. He wants to follow the path. There is something to be said here where it could be tying it into the themes of the show, where she's taking, like, because she gets upset when she's told that there's no such thing as a random act, but a random thing happening, and Katie explains to her that even the worst thing imaginable, there's still technically science behind it that says this happened for this reason. And she gets upset, and when she's told she's going to be at devs in so many hours and she's going to be there for this thing, we'll talk about what the thing is in a minute. Like, she gets so upset, and there's almost like a delightful irony that she then takes comfort in something she knows, as opposed, or not even irony, just like, it makes sense. She wants something she knows and can control. She's taking control of the situation, and she's told that her choice doesn't matter. So, because that's how I was reading the scene before she actually made the speech, and she was just walking towards him and saying, "Come to bed." I was thinking, the reason why she's doing this is not because she's decided she's in love with him now, or she's realised that she's still in love with Jamie. It's because this is something she can feel that she's making the choice to do. She feels in control of this moment, and she's doing this to prove to herself that, no, she does control of her own fate, she does make her own choices, blah, 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 blah. But then it kind of sells it more like because the music kind of like gets romantic, and we even cut to the love scene at one point during the montage, and I was kind of like, this is weird. I don't really like any of this.
Yeah, I wasn't buying it. I will say, you just reminded me of one of my favorite moments in the big conversation that wasn't about the big ideas, was in that random part of the conversation, and it's where she goes, she talks about, like, a kid getting cancer when she's asked to provide something that's random, and Katie's just like, no, aberration in the DNA. She's like, well, that's not a reason. She said, and she's like, no, I said a reason. I didn't say it had to be a good reason. That gave me a kind of a
The only one I can pick a fight with on her examples as to why there's no such thing as random is when she gives the example of picking, because Lily says, "What about 5 identical copies of a book on a shelf, right, at a store, and you're just taking one because that's the one you're going to buy?" And Katie responds with, "Oh, well, you picked the second one because it's been less handled than the first one, right?" And a lot of people do that. That's a thing that happens, but. I also do think there's a jet because I sometimes if I'm offered 5 of the same thing on a shelf, like I'll go with something different every time.
Okay, well then, no, but I will say her exact reasoning was more specific to Lily. I think she just knows what she's like well enough. I think that the reason it's not random is it's the one you reach at first, the one that's closest to you usually, but as to where you're stood.
No. That's not
your way.
That's not how my mind works. That is not how my mind works. I will think of a different reason to pick a different thing if I'm presented with identical choices every time.
So hang on. So you just said you think of a different reason. Therefore, there is a reason. Therefore, it is not random.
No, not a reason. You're mixing this up. I don't think of a reason. I think of a different choice.
Okay, give me an example here.
Well, the same example. You get 5 identical books on a thing.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe sometimes I do pick the second one because it's less handled, but I'm feeling feisty, so I say, I'll go for the third. And I go, no, I'll go for the fourth instead. No, maybe the fifth. No, and I'll think about it a little bit, and then I'll just first one I put it in my head, I'll just take that one. Random. My brain is random. It picked one at random.
There's probably a subconscious reason. And I was gonna say, I was all the way up to that point. I was like, you're going, oh, I'll take the third one. Oh, I'll take the fourth one. That's all you thinking about. Oh, I'm gonna make a different choice here intentionally. That is the opposite of random. Can you tell that was the most interesting part of that conversation for a long time?
It was the most interesting part of that conversation for a long time. And I kind of agree that there is not really such a thing as random in the sense that there's always technically a reason. But
there is things that are so complex that they may as well be random, like rolling a dice or
But at the same time, like the idea of predicting what a person's going to choose is also impossible, right? As much as we love the shows, like sort of ideas of the science fiction, ultimately, there's no really way, because sometimes I'll just pick something like that I would never otherwise pick because it's just on that day I just feel that way, and there's no outside factors affecting that. Like sometimes there is, sometimes you can sort of track it and say I felt this way because this happened to me in the morning and maybe I was in a bad mood or something.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you there. Isn't that like 99% of the time with these shows and movies with this idea? Isn't that the point?
No, it is the point. It is the point. Yeah. But I'm just based on this debate she had with the books and the other things, because I was completely on Katie's side, which is like says, well, why is a kid leukemia? I'm like, well, it's just an unfortunate, scientific reason. It's not.
There is a reason that you can quantify and go, this is why. Well, it's not a good reason, like she says, but there is an explanation.
Yeah. Anyway, so the big thing, of course, she gets to, which is the actual interesting part of this whole thing, is that it can't see past a certain point. Now, admittedly, I'm sure you also had flashes of Doomsday Clock in your head as soon as she said that. For those of you who don't read comic books, DC Comics had a big thing. It was a sequel to Watchmen called Doomsday Clock. It was a very... Dr. Manhattan couldn't see beyond a certain point, and he sees all time at the same time. It was a whole thing. And obviously this, in some way, will prove that there is free will. Because obviously it's like, okay, is this the end of the world? Katie thinks it's the end of like physics as we know it. Part of me thinks it's just the machine gets turned off and on again.
That's what I mean. It could be just the end of the machine. Maybe there's an earthquake.
That said, it can see further back in time before it was built. So I don't know if it's the end of the machine really holds much water.
No, that's true. But I mean...
logic doesn't really present itself there.
I thought it was an interesting concept because they talk about how it can only see past a certain point, and it's always been that way since they turned it on. And they just assumed that, okay, there's only X amount of computing power, and okay, this will always be the limit of, like, let's say it was 3 years from when they first turned it on. It would always be,
Yeah,
okay, we
well,
can only see 3 years ahead.
even if it's not computing power, it could all just be a case of like there's so much data and there's so many variables perhaps because so many people in the world of everything happening that ultimately you can only ever go a few months in the future because there's just too many things that could change.
Yeah, honestly,
Yeah.
I think it goes back to the very first scene of the show,
Mm,
with Sergei mapping the little one cell
yeah.
thing
But then
where,
she makes
okay, they could get it for X amount of time, and then, okay, it went out of sync because we can't keep it up long enough.
But then she makes it clear it's not that. This is no. Like this, it's been always been this state. It's not like we keep going 3 months in advance. It's no. We've always stopped dead at this state, and now it's only 21 hours away. Well, we've got 21 hours until this. There's no future anymore.
Yeah, but Lily is in the dev's room as it happens.
Well, we also know that she's going to be dying. Technically, she didn't tell her that part, obviously.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it's frustrating because it's kind of hinging a lot of this on Lily, and she's the worst part of the show, and it's very frustrating.
I also don't like the premise of these very scientifically minded people kind of going with correlation equals causation. Yes, Lily is there. That does not mean she is the cause of whatever happens.
No.
But they are dead set convinced that it's her that does something, and that doesn't track for me.
There was a scene at the start where Katie was looking at the dead rat or dead mouse, or whatever it was, in the room from before the experiment. And I was actually thinking in that scene she's going to try and bring it back to life somehow. Because, I mean, and again, we even hear the words like he's trying to resurrect his daughter. That's something that Lyndon says to Stuart in his house. Well, house trailer, but same difference.
Home.
His home, yes. Which, by the way, were you shocked when he said he was 19? I thought he was like 50.
No, I bought it. I knew he was young, but I assumed he was at least 18 to be working there.
Sure. I always took it as he's this wunderkind who's just great at what he does and always has been from a young age.
Fair enough. No, I always just figured he looked really young.
I mean, don't know. That's still young to have this job. It's just I genuinely thought he was like mid-teens.
No, I get why. If I was just looking at him, I'd probably guess the same. It was just context that made me think at least 18.
Yeah, but anyway, so part of me thinks that Lily will technically die and then somehow come back to life. I don't know under what context, but does
that count as breaking the laws of physics enough to be the event?
Yeah. In which case, you're just kind of copying the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's enough to trigger the new Slayer.
God, I hate you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in a murky place with the show now. I have to admit, I'm in kind of a murky place after this episode where, because it does that thing as well where Kenton's kind of a full-on villain now, where he seems to like be paranoid that now you're all friends now because he sees them all together leaving the house, and he's like, so now he's just an outright antagonist for everyone. He's going to be causing chaos for everyone.
I kind of preferred it when Forrest was the antagonist of the show in an interesting way. Whereas now it feels less like he is, and like you say, it's shifted more to Kenton, and that's, I don't know, just not as interesting.
Yeah. Really weird episode. I kind of like I kept trying to like it throughout, and I kept finding myself just with these roadblocks of, Lily's not that interesting. Lily's like just the way she responds to everything that Katie says, and even though it makes sense that she would say, "Oh, you're insane, you're all just crazy," like even though that completely makes sense, when she said it out loud, I was like, you know what? Like we're 6 episodes in an 8-episode show. I'm really not in the mood for that to be the character where she is right now. This close to the end is like, oh, you're all crazy. It's not real. This is where she should have been episode 2. Like get on with it.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I really hope this isn't yet another case of a show that we kind of like, for the most part, kind of getting towards the end of the season or right at the end and just being like, can't recommend it anymore, because that's happened too often lately.
Yeah, looking at you, outsider.
Yeah, that happened earlier than this did, but same problem. It's been happening for a while. I'm going back to like the first season of Castle Rock, where that last episode just ruined the whole season.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's probably the worst case of it, actually, where it was
That was
just.
9 episodes where we were like, no, this is really solid. We would recommend this to anyone who's into this sort of thing.
If I recall, episode like 9 was one of the better episodes, and then episode 10 just completely tanked the whole thing.
Yeah,
There was a.
that was a perfect example of how not sticking your landing can ruin everything that you've garnered over the season.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you don't need necessarily a great landing. You don't need a great ending that blows your mind. It just has to work. And
it just has to land, doesn't it?
because a great example has always been Lost, where Lost's ending is never considered the best part of that show. Some people outright hate it. I think it's perfectly fine. And in that case, it really is the journey that was the experience, and the ending just works. It works as well as it needs to. Not particularly great, not particularly bad, but it doesn't ruin anything. The 6 years of guessing and like going in crazy theories,
and
like
that's the thing.
wasn't
There's
ruined
so
by it.
much more weight on an ending of a TV show once it gets to like 4 or 5 seasons, especially, as opposed to these 1-season shows or on any movie in particular.
But there's other shows where no, the ending, like if the destination just spits in the face of what came before it, it can completely alter how you think about the rest of it, and can, it's a really rough thing. Even with movie trilogies and stuff like that, sometimes you get that third entry that's just like, ugh. Now, admittedly, with movies, they have the benefit of they had to work on their own in the first place, so typically you can still watch the first movie or whatever and still get the good experience out of it. But it's hard not to watch The Matrix and think, oh, Reloading and Revolutions are kind of shit. Like,
yeah, it's you just kind of want to watch the first one and then just stop there, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much. I've seen the full trilogy. I mean, a couple of times. Don't get me wrong, just out of people having it on, whatever. But I mean, I watched the first one last year, and then I went, "Oh, I'm good. I don't need to watch anymore." And
Yeah,
that was nice.
yeah. I mean, yeah, the first one's one I watch every so often, but Reloading and Revolutions I have not seen since. I've not seen since
years.
not since before the start of the last decade. Like it's
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, and John, this is kind of a problem with the current state of movies being like, oh, shared universes, everything's going to set up something, and sequels, and because if the sequels don't happen or if they're not very good, then you're left with even that first movie that doesn't really work on its own anymore.
Yeah, a big one. I mean, I didn't like this movie, admittedly, so I don't really care. But a big one last year was Alita Battle Angel, where I felt like it actually ended up just feeling like a prologue to what what they really wanted to do, and then it's like, oh, it bombed, and you're probably not going to get any more of it. So
yeah,
tough.
I like that more than you did. I didn't love it, but I liked it more than you for sure. And yeah, I definitely feel like that.
Yeah. So it's a shame. It's a shame. But the problem with the TV show is, though, is I feel like a TV show, especially a limited series, where it's it's meant to be one complete story. Because like I say, a movie, technically, in theory, the standalone movie should work on its own first, and then you add more to it after. A TV show, by its nature, a limited series especially, is supposed to be an 8-episode, 10-episode story or whatever. So it's a lot more like if in that first movie, the last 20, 30 minutes was bad, as opposed to just the sequel is bad. There's a difference.
Yeah, there is. And do you know what the problem is as well? Is that this is considerably more of a time sink than investment in a TV show. So, okay, we're roughly 5 hours in before this episode. Whereas in a movie, you're maybe 90 minutes in out of 2 hours. That doesn't feel well, not good, and you wouldn't go, "Oh, I'm going to recommend this." It feels less insulting to your usage of time.
I'll be
because,
less
sure.
I'll be less annoyed typically. I mean, not always. I mean, some movies can be really bad, but typically speaking, I'll be less annoyed if I'm just disappointed with the ending of a movie. I'll go, well, I'm probably going to watch that again. I'll forget it existed, but I'm not that mad that
But
I
it was
watched
only
it.
2 hours of your life.
Yeah.
Whereas by the end of it, will be somewhere in the range of 6 to 8 hours.
I'm actually pissed I spent 10 hours on The Outsider. I'm actually pissed that I spent that much time on that show.
Oh, that was such a waste of time by the end. Well, there's so much things I could have done with 10 hours.
So it's rough, and I feel bad that people who maybe still enjoying the show came to this review, and we spent most of it talking about why it's kind of a downer of an episode and it's not working. But
I think the reason it's so frustrating though is because we spent 5 episodes being like, this has a lot of potential. There's a lot of things we like. There was always been things that we didn't love, but we were mostly pretty positive.
Yeah, I what makes it worse for me is that this is the type of episode in most shows that I tend to love when the show is good, and the fact that it kind of fumbled this one makes me really concerned about the ending.
Yeah, my concern is how much of this ending is going to hinge now on Lily, and how much am I supposed to care about whatever she does or doesn't do. If it swings more into through the lens of Forrest and or just the ideas, maybe it can be salvaged and I can really enjoy this still. But if it is Lily being the crux of it all, then might have a problem.
Yes. I'm expecting to be disappointed a little bit now.
Me too. Expectations have absolutely been lowered.
We're at 2 left. We'll see how it goes. See how it lands. But hey, but honestly, this was kind of a weak episode that, unfortunately, wasn't only weak on its own. It kind of pointed out a lot of the flaws. It's not even pointed out. We knew what they all were. It was just all of a sudden those flaws are a lot more important and intrusive into the show. And they're rearing their ugly heads. But hey, you can let us know what you thought of this one in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the show and the channel and everything we do here, you can head over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv. And you can support us for as little as $1 per month. You get bonus content. You can get some stuff early at the $5 tier. Go and have a look and see if you're interested. But otherwise, check out other shows we have. Obviously, we're reviewing our TV shows. We tried out the first episode of Tales from the Loop from Amazon Prime, another sci-fi show, which kind of an anthology, although the comments people who've watched more said it's less of an anthology than we maybe were suspecting, so maybe there's a bit more connective tissue episode to episode, which is cool. But we checked out the first episode of that. You can, of course, also check out our Westworld reviews. Obviously, that's a biggie, for especially sci-fi wise. It's one of our bigger shows.
Some similar themes going on in the third season as this show.
Oh, for sure. So yeah, check out that stuff. And of course, there's a science fiction movie podcast that I do with Tara called The Atomic Cinema Experiment, so you can have a look at that as well. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?